Phyllis, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. You just want to get on the camera. That's really what I feel. Good morning. Good to hear all that fellowshipping going on, but it is time for class. So you went from the good stuff to me, but I'm sorry about that, but that's the way it works. I hope you started with a bang, to have a good week this week. We'll hopefully continue that on through class anyway. Anyone have anything that they particularly want mentioned or brought to people's attention with regards to prayer? Bill was telling me that Phyllis fell this week off the porch. She didn't break any bones or anything, but she's very sore, scraped up, and not able to get out and come here with us today. But like I said, nothing too serious, but certainly annoying. Well, she lost her toenail and her big toe. That doesn't sound fun, even in and of itself. I don't even want to think about it. So we certainly want to be thinking of her and send all of our best to her. Judy. Okay, everybody, no more people falling. That's my rule. Anybody else? Oh, sorry, Jane.
Sue West, our sister in Hiawassee, her husband Michael did come home last week, and Wednesday night he was baptized.
Great. Hey, I'll take that. Beats those falls entirely. All of it's important to be prayed. Yeah, Judy. Corey Lloyd's sister passed away. Definitely want to send her sympathy there. All right, nothing else. Let's start already with prayer. Glorious Heavenly Father, we're grateful for our health and for the weather and for this country where we can gather together as a body of your believers here. We're thankful for each and every person that's present, and we ask that you be with them throughout this day as every day, that this might be an encouragement to them, that it might be an opportunity for growth, that it might be an opportunity to grow the relationships with fellow Christians. We're mindful of those that can't be here with us, those that were mentioned, those that are in our prayer list that goes around. There's many on that list, and we know that you're aware of all those as well as any that we may not be aware of. We pray that the issues that prevent them from being here might be removed, that their health, that their situations might be improved to where they can join with us and we can edify one another. We think of so many that are going through challenges right now. We know that so many that are looking for help and assistance from you, and we hope that you will give them comfort and strength and health where it is your will. Be with us as we study your word today. As with every time, we ask that we might see lessons in it that are there for us to obtain, to apply to our lives, that we might be more like what you have pictured us to be, that you desire for us to be closer to that goal of perfection that you've laid out. We ask all this in your Son's name. Amen. So we continue on with Here I Am. We've spent a lot of time on a lot of people. I'm not going to focus on all of them. Let's get the list getting really long anymore, so I'll just focus on the last few of those. We talked about Caleb, who spoke out the words, "Here I am," to claim his promised land, to say he was ready to take it and to obtain the promise that he'd been given. Samuel has said it a few times. He said it a lot in being obedient, even to the point of having to tell Eli some very negative news. And then we also saw when he dared for charges to be filed against him, because he knew that the situation with the king was not going to be as ideal as people thought, and he wanted them to be able to say it wasn't because of him, the end of the judges, it was because they had wanted to do different than what God wanted. And we saw Jonathan's armor bearer, who was committed both to Jonathan and to God and believed in both of them, that what they had said would be in fact what could be carried out from that. And then last week we talked about Ahimelech as well as Saul's death messenger. With Ahimelech, David, trying to escape Saul, lied to Ahimelech about why he was there when he went and got showbread, and he also got Goliath's sword. And he thought, I think, that he was going to maybe save Ahimelech from being able to be punished for dealing with him, but that's not what happened. Saul wanted somebody to be the scapegoat, somebody to blame, somebody he could get a hold of. But when he asked Ahimelech about it, even though Ahimelech had done nothing wrong, had not conspired against Saul, he had no idea of what had been going on between Saul and David. Ahimelech paid the price with his life and the life of everybody that was in the city. All the priests and their families and their animals and everything was lost to that because of Saul's anger. And then we have the Amalekite, who came with a tall tale about how Saul had died and that he had been asked by Saul to kill him, when that wasn't really what Saul did. Saul didn't ask him for that. He didn't even talk to him. He obviously was a looter. He had the symbols of authority that were on Saul, but he was not the one that had killed him. But the lie didn't turn out very well for him. He paid the price just as though he had killed him. So it wasn't the goal that he wanted to get out of that. Saying, here I am, didn't pay off in either of those cases. This week we're going to talk about David and Shimei. You can know one of those names, probably know less about the other one. So we've been talking about David, where we ended it with the last. With Saul was the fact that Saul had died, and like you said, the Amalekite came to share the news with David and with a false story about how it transpired, but nonetheless he came and shared it with David. What's kind of transpired with David since then before we pick up our story today? Well, David is ultimately anointed as king. It doesn't start out quickly. At first, it's just Judah that puts him up as king. And the remaining son of Saul, Ishbosheth, is put to be the king of Israel, as it's called, the other tribes from that. But ultimately, Ishbosheth is not a really good leader. And his army commander, he insults the army commander, and the army commander turns over basically the nation from Ishbosheth to David, and a couple of Ishbosheth's lieutenants kill him, stab him in the stomach from that. David then turns around and shows kindness to a man named Mephibosheth. He is the son of Jonathan. He's the one remaining one. He was the one that his nurse tried to take him. He was small at the time, and trying to flee, dropped him, and he lost his ability to walk from that. David took him in as part of that relationship and his promise to Jonathan from that. Later, David sinned with Bathsheba. You remember he saw her bathing on top of the rooftop, and he brought her in and had relationships with her, and then found out she was pregnant and proceeded to find a way to try to cover that up, ultimately having Uriah killed. And ultimately, part of his punishment for that was the loss of that child, the death of the child that came from that connection. David had a lot of problems with his family. We see a lot of problems with families in the Old Testament. And David was not without having that same issue in various different ways, one which we'll look at more today. But he had one of his sons called Amnon, who got really enamored with his half-sister. And so he worked it out, partly with the help of David, without David's knowledge, to get in a situation where he took advantage of her. He committed incest. He raped her. She was willing to go on with it because she didn't want any more shame with it, but he didn't carry through. Now he didn't care about her because of the way he had gotten it. Well, that irritated her full brother, which was a man by the name of Absalom. So Absalom bided his time a little bit. Again, he used David without David's knowledge to make sure that Amnon was going to be at his house for a party with his other brothers, at which point he told his servants to kill Amnon. That, of course, was not well received by David. David did not like his sons being killed, certainly not by the other sons. So Absalom had to flee his dad for fear of his life. That really hurt David. David really was a big man of love for family, even to be a blindness to him, I think, in a lot of ways. And he was blind with that one, and he fled. And ultimately, his commander of the army realized he needed to get him back, and in various ways convinced him to let Absalom come back. He let him come back, but he would not see him. He was kind of in exile even while he was there in Jerusalem. And finally, Absalom forced the issue, and ultimately, David forgave him. So that's kind of the background, picking up from where we are now. Absalom is a trouble in a lot of ways. So we're going to find out here where he conspires. It's often the case as you look throughout history there, and in history, and not that far distant past, you see the same thing where there's conspiring to take over the throne, even if you're not the one that is designated as the next heir. You can just take care of the other heirs. And Absalom kind of had a plan for how he would take over. So we're going to read about that in 2 Samuel chapter 15. We'll look at verses 1 through 18 and then 23 through 26. After this, after he had been forgiven of all this stuff and gotten back in a relationship with David, after this it happened that Absalom provided himself with chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. He wanted to have a presence. He wanted everybody to see him and think he was important. Now Absalom would rise early and stand beside the way to the gate. So it was, whenever anyone who had a lawsuit came to the king for a decision, and that's what they would do when they had something they want to get decided from that Absalom would call them and say, "Hey, what city are you from?" Not the way we start a lot of our conversation. "What city are you from?" And he would say, "Your servant is from such and such a tribe of Israel." Then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your case is good and right, but there's no deputy of the king to hear you. There's nobody there. The king hasn't made any preparation, has not set it up to where this is going to be able to be judged for you. Isn't that a shame? That's just too bad that the king hasn't done very well with that." And then, moreover, Absalom would say, "Oh, that I were made judge over the land, and everyone who has any suit or cause would come to me, then I would give him justice. Look, if I was king, this wouldn't be a problem. My dad hasn't done very well. He's not got people to make these decisions for you. I would see your case. I'd make sure you got justice out of that case." And so it was, whenever anyone came near to bow down to him, that he would put his hand and take him and kiss him. In this manner, Absalom acted toward all Israel who came to the king for judgment. Why did he do that? So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. It was his conniving plan. I'm going to ingratiate myself to everyone. I'm going to show them that I've got that close relationship here. I'm a member of royalty, but I'm going to draw you near and kiss you, showing you much more intimacy than I would normally show from a prince to the people from that. I'm going to tell you how you're being mistreated, and I will give you justice if only I was king. And so he is getting into the people's hearts that they're feeling an affinity to them, that he's going to be the one that's going to save them. And it's those promises that politicians give us all. Not necessarily realities, no more than it was today as it was then. Now it came to pass after 40 years, he spent a lot of time doing it. He's had time to ingratiate himself. He's got to if he's going to go that way with one person at a time. That Absalom said to the king, he's got to move on to the next phase. He says to David, "Please let me go to Hebron and pay the vow which I made to the Lord. For your servant took a vow while I dwelt at Geshur in Syria when I was exiled, saying, if the Lord indeed brings me back to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord." Guess what? That didn't happen. He didn't do that. He didn't tell God that. That was not Absalom's way. He was not connected with God very closely. But that's what he told David, and David, as the loving father, is going to believe him from that. And the king said to him, "Go in peace." So he arose and went to Hebron. All right, he's out of the city now, so he can go on with the plan for that. He's not under the view of his dad or most anybody else in the royal court. He's somewhere separate from that key city in Hebron, though. It says in verse 10, "Then Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel." Now, these spies weren't like the normal sneaking around trying to find out things. These spies are actually more like messengers. Because they went out saying, "As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, Absalom reigns in Hebron." Absalom is now the king, and he's in Hebron. That's what you're going to see. You hear that trumpet. Remember how I took care of you? Remember how close we are? So now when you hear a trumpet, you're going to make that public announcement that I'm now king and I'm in Hebron. And with Absalom went 200 men invited from Jerusalem, special people that he had gotten that connection with. However, they went along innocently and did not know anything. They weren't part of his big plan. They weren't overtly aware of what his plan was, at least. They were clearly people that he trusted, that he thought he was going to get in his favor, but not necessarily people that were in on what he was doing. That seems to be pretty much just something he knew himself. Then Absalom sent for Ahithophel, the Gileonite, David's counselor, from his city from Gilead while he offered sacrifices. So he sent off for the person that counsels David. He's able to do that because he's David's son from that. And the conspiracy grew strong, for the people with Absalom continually increased in number. More and more people start connecting up with Absalom. He's gathering himself, not just people, but an army from that. And now it gets to a point where, 13, now a messenger came to David saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom. They're not with you anymore. The people are now gathering behind Absalom, and we all know what that means. The only way Absalom's going to become king is if he eliminates you and probably most of the rest of the royalty, most of the rest of the family. David's gotten some very bad news, and he's going to have to react to it. So David said to all his servants who were with him in Jerusalem, arise and let us flee, or we shall not escape from Absalom. Make haste to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly and bring disaster upon us and strike the city with the edge of the sword. David says it's gotten so bad, he's going to get here if we don't get out of here right away. And if he gets here, he's going to kill everybody. So I'm going to be thinking of everybody else. If we leave, he's not going to have any reason to kill people. So we want to, make sure that doesn't happen. And we kind of like to save all of our lives. The people that you think he's going to want to kill, those are the people we've got to get up and get out of this town. We've got to run for it. Imagine you're the king, man after God's own heart, you're a friend of God, and yet you're going to have to flee. And he's not doing this when he's young, by the way. And then the king went out with his household, all his household after him. But the king left 10 women concubines to keep the house. Had to have somebody there to make sure it was taken care of, and so he left his concubines rather than any of his wives or any of his children from that. And the king went out with all the people after him and stopped at the outskirts of Jerusalem. Then all his servants passed before him, and all the Cherethites, all the Pelethites, and all the Gittites, 600 men who had followed him from Gath, and they passed before the king. You've got to imagine that David is there at the outskirts, saddened and just almost in disbelief that this has come to this. That his conquering and creating Jerusalem as his city and as the capital, if you will, of Israel, and he is now running, fleeing from it, from his own son from that. And so he watches to make sure everybody gets out and has that one last sad look, kind of like, the last person. When the captain goes down with the ship, he's not going to go down with it, but he's going to be the last one there, basically, on the outskirts of the people that are going to leave. And all the country wept with a loud voice. Was everybody with Absalom? Absolutely not. Did he have a big enough group to cause an issue? Yeah, absolutely. He had a large army, but it didn't have all the people. The people are crying with a loud voice because of the strife that's in there and the family, the disruption of how Absalom is treating David and how it's going to come to some kind of a crossroads from that. And all the people crossed over, all the ones that were with David. The king himself also crossed over the brook Kidron, and all the people crossed over towards the way of the wilderness. Kidron was kind of a boundary. We'll see it later on in another part of the story. There was Zadok also, and the Levites with him, bearing the ark of the covenant of God, Zadok being the high priest at the time. And they set down the ark of the God, and Abiathar went up until all the people had finished crossing over from the city. And then the king said to Zadok, carry the ark of God back into the city. Well, for one thing, taking the ark with you hadn't promised success in the war, had it? But he's chosen not to take the symbol of God's presence with him as he flees. You don't really want God fleeing from his own people from that. What was his justification? He said, if I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he, the Lord, God, will bring me back and show me both the ark of God and his dwelling place, the tabernacle. But if he says thus, I have no delight in you, here I am. Let him do to me as seems good to him. So David states it not in reaction to a question, but he's saying, not only I'm here in any case, but he says, if God's not happy with me, if God decided I'm not going to be king anymore, here I am. God, you can do with me as you please. Whatever seems good to you, that's how much I love you and trust you. So this situation, it was David who declared his accountability. He says, here I am. If I'm in trouble, I'm not hiding from God. I may have hidden from Saul when he was seeing me, but I'm not going to hide from God. If he's mad at me, if he's going to punish me, here I am. If that's what his will is, then let it be. He made it clear that he'd accept whatever God's judgment was of him and whatever that meant to his reign that had been promised, that it would be carried on for generations. He wanted everyone to know that he left his fate in God's hands. And he was comfortable with that, as much as you could be. What a wonderful thing. Put the ark back. If God's with me, I'll be back and I'll see it. And if not, God can do with me whatever he wills, because he is just and I trust him. Well, he continues on his journey from that. It doesn't go without some consternation of people along the way. So he is what I would call in modern terms heckled along the way. So we pick up at 2 Samuel chapter 16, verse 5, and go through 13. Now when King David came to Bahurim, there was a man from the family of the house of Saul whose name was Shimei, or Shimei, or whatever you want to say it, various ways that it gets said, the son of Gera, coming from there. So here's somebody that's in the relationship with Saul, some kind of family. We can't draw a direct line from that. He's in the same, as you'll see later, he's from the tribe of Benjamin, which is what Saul was from, so there's at least that connection. Beyond that, don't really know exactly how he's connected, but he was from the family of the house of Saul, so his relative. So he comes out from that city of Bahurim. What did he do? He came out cursing continuously. He came, and he threw stones at David and at all the servants of King David. Can you imagine that? David, who killed his 10,000s, who killed Goliath, who was the king of everything, had built up and won all these wars, and this one guy is out there cursing at him and throwing rocks. I mean, think of the gall of doing that. You really got to believe that David's fallen down completely from that. And all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. Also Shimei said thus when he cursed, come out, you bloodthirsty man, you rogue. Now, was Shimei wrong about him being a bloodthirsty man? Well, not completely, was he? What was God's reasoning for why David could not build his home, to build his temple ultimately? God said to him, you shall not build a house for my name, because you have been a man of war and have shed blood. In 1 Chronicles 26, verse 3. So he was bloodthirsty only because God wanted it that way. And it took that to establish Israel as well as David had to get it and defeat the Philistines. But he was a man that obviously killed a lot. God said that. Shimei wasn't necessarily wrong about it from that aspect. He continued on and said, the Lord has brought upon you all the blood of the house of Saul. Did he have anything to do with the blood of the house of Saul? Not directly. You know, the Philistines killed Saul and 3 of his sons. Ishbosheth, his other son, was killed by his own captains, not at David's command. In fact, David ended up killing them when they came and, again, thought they'd done a good thing. And then his illegitimate sons, he had to give to the Gideonites. Why? Because there was a famine in the land, and God indicated the reason for that was because of Saul's mistreatment of the Gideonites. And David went to the Gideonites and said, what can I do to satisfy you, to make this go away? And they said, give us 7 of the relatives of Saul. And so he gave them those sons that were illegitimate as a major part of that. And he gave him his grandchildren through Michal, the one that Saul's daughters that David married, and that for a while was married to a different man. And the children that she had with him, not David, are the ones he gave up. So he did give them up. So secondhand, you could sort of say, but he never directly did it. It was not his decision to go forward with it. He says, in whose place you have reigned, in the place of Saul. And the Lord has delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom your son. It's already done. It's a done deal. Absalom's now going to be the king. I'm satisfied with it. That's why I'm out here throwing rocks at you and cursing at you. It's the way it's going to go. So now you're caught in your own evil. This is all evil you've been doing because you are a bloodthirsty man. It goes back to that. Again, not totally wrong, but placing it as a part of being evil, not the motivation and not the reason. It was mostly God's direction and God's desire that he did what killing he did. But there was a lot of it. And Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, relative of David through his sister, said to the king, "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? How can you put up with this? You're the king, and you're letting this guy say this stuff to you? Let's not let this. This one guy over here throwing rocks at us. We should go ahead and just wipe that voice out. Please, let me go over and take off his head. Just let me go. I'm tired of hearing him. This is ridiculous." But the king, David, said, "What have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? So let him curse." Why should he let him curse? Because the Lord has said to him, "Curse David." Who then shall say, "Why have you done so?" If God has allowed him to do this, if God maybe even directed him to curse me here, he has a purpose in that, and we don't have any reason to challenge why God's allowing him to curse me. It's not up to you to kill him. Let him do it. Much like leave the ark and we'll see if we can come back to it. Just let it be. Ignore it the best you can. Because right now, what is he going to say about it? And David said to Abishai and all his servants, "See how my son who came from my own body seeks my life. Absalom is going to try to kill me. We know that. That's why we flee. He wants my kingdom. The only way he knows he can fully get it is if I'm dead." This is my son. It's not some stranger. It's not this guy that's cursing us along the road. It's my son's going to do that. How much more may this Benjaminite, Shimei, let him alone. Leave Shimei alone and let him curse, for so the Lord has ordered him. David fully believing that God's directed him to do that, to bring him down, to humble him. It may be that the Lord will look on my affliction. Maybe God will see what's going on with me and he will have sympathy on me. And because of that, and the Lord will repay me with good for his cursing this day. Something good's going to come of this. I will take it. I will take this humility situation that I'm going through right now, and God may turn it into something good. Just leave the guy alone. And as David and his men went along the road, Shimei went along the hillside opposite him and cursed him as he went, threw stones at him, and kicked up dust. Bold man. I mean, it's not like David was alone. He didn't have his mighty men with him. You have to admire. That guy really was trying to fire things up. He was one of those rabid, fans of, like a politician, some of those we have these days. Just kind of out there crazy, no matter which side you're on. That's kind of the way Shimei was. Yay, Absalom. He's going out there with campaigns and slogans for Absalom to be king. So, ultimately, unfortunately, David has to go into battle with his own son. Now, we'll find David doesn't himself go out to battle, but we'll see why. 2 Samuel 18, 1 through 18. And David numbered the people who were with him. He counted, and he set captains of thousands and captains of hundreds over them. So is David down to just a few people that left him in Jerusalem? No. People have joined him along the way. Mighty men, people that know of his renown, people that are astounded with what his son is doing from that. So he's now got thousands of people with him as far as soldiers. And he set up for his leadership of the army from that. Then David sent out 1/3 of the people under the hand of Joab, that's his commander of the army, and 1/3 under the hand of Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, his nephew basically, and Joab's brother, that's kind of who was in it, and 1/3 under the hand of Ittai the Gittite. So he's got 3 different parts of his army that he sent out. And then the king said to the people, "I also will surely go out with you myself. I'm going to go out and lead you in this battle. I'll be out there." Remember, he's not a particularly young man. He's not as old as he will get, obviously, but he's not a real young man at this point. But what happens? But the people answered, "You shall not go out." That's an unusual situation. The king says he's going to do something, and the people say, "No, you're not." Wait a minute, I'm king. I get to decide this. You don't get to decide. Well, no, we're going to tell you that's not what we do. But they have a justification for it. "For if we flee away, they will not care about us. Nor if half of us die, will they care about us." Absalom's army is not going to care about any of us, no matter what goes on from that. "But you are worth 10,000 of us now. Your presence is more important than anything else right now. We need to keep you alive, or there's no reason to fight this battle. There's no reason to try to take them on. For now you are more help to us in the city. You're more help as our presence, as our present leadership out there, that we're fighting for you as our motivation to go out there than physically trying to fight in the battle yourself." Interestingly, David agrees. Then the king said to them, Whatever seems best to you, I will do. I'm going to keep you guys happy. If all of you are convinced of that, then I'm going to assume that's the right thing to do. So the king stood by the gate, and all the people went out by hundreds and by thousands. Just like he stood by the brook Kidron as they left Jerusalem, he stands by the gate of the city as all the army goes out. He watches them go, hundreds and thousands. Now the king had commanded Joab, Abishai, and Attai. Remember, those are the leaders of the three different parts of his army, the three groups of his army, saying, deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. What? Absalom's trying to kill you. Absalom killed one of your sons. Absalom has not been a good guy. And your answer to us all is we're out now fighting, and some of us are going to die, and the person who's caused it all, be nice to him. Just bring him back. It's that his father's love, and always blaming yourself. He must be like this for something I did wrong as a father. Anybody ever been there before? Not an uncommon feeling. It seems to be what David was feeling. And all the people heard. Everybody understood what David's wishes were. It wasn't just those three that knew what his command would be when he gave the king gave all the captains orders concerning Absalom. So it carried on to the captains below. So the people went out into the field of battle against Israel, and the battle was in the woods of Ephraim. The people of Israel were overthrown there. That's the people under Absalom. Those are the people of Israel. Were overthrown there before the servants of David. And a great slaughter of 20,000 took place there that day. 20,000, indicating pretty much that was how many of the Israelites that were under Absalom's direction were killed. For the battle was scattered over the face of the whole countryside, and the woods devoured more people that day than the sword devoured. Okay, that's interesting. I can't really tell you what that means. But that's the way God usually operated, right? If he would decide on that, he would do things to get those things to happen. Does that mean he killed them with the forest? Or did they disappear? I don't know. But the forest did more than the sword. Then Absalom himself met the servants of David. Now Absalom rode on a mule. Interesting choice of ideals, but much more how royalty did was a lot of times. And the mule went into the thick boughs of a great terebinth tree, and his head got caught in the terebinth. He's seemingly by himself. Isn't that kind of a strange picture? So he's left hanging between heaven and earth. There is his head. He's stuck. The mule which was under him went on. So he's there with his head stuck in between the branches, dangling from the tree. The man who would be king. Kind of a humbling situation when you think. Hilarious for anybody who probably walked up on it. Now a certain man saw the situation, saw it, and told Joab, the leader of the army, the real commander of everything, and said, you know what? I just saw Absalom hanging in a terebinth tree. And probably laughed about it. He was hanging there. He's got his neck. It's the funniest thing I ever saw. He thought he was going to be king. Now he's hanging from his head in a terebinth tree. Stupidest guy looking. It's really hilarious. It took me a while to get over that, to get here to tell you that. But that's what was going on. So Joab said to the man who told him, you just saw him? Why did you not strike him there to the ground? I would have given you 10 shekels of silver and a belt. You'd have been able to hold up your pants. No, that's not what the belt was for. It was a reward, right? These are the special things. Now, wait a minute. Joab's going to give him stuff? Is that in direction with what David said? No. But the man said to Joab, though I were to receive 1,000 shekels of silver, man, I would not raise my hand against the king's son. Why? Because he's the king's son? Not so much in this case. For in our hearing the king commanded you and Abishai and Attai, saying, beware lest anyone touch the young man Absalom. I heard the king. This is not what the king wants, what you're trying to get me to do. Otherwise, I would have dealt falsely against my own life, for there's nothing hidden from the king, and you yourself would have set yourself against me. We've seen this before. People carry out something, think it's all great with the king, and the king doesn't like it. Yeah, how does that go? Not well. Guy reports that he killed Saul. How'd that go for that guy? Not well. The two guys that report that they killed Ishbosheth, who challenged his rule. What happens to them? Oh, they're killed as well. It doesn't go well to go against what David thinks as far as royalty goes. I'm not going to do it. You, in fact, probably would have been the one David would have directed to have me killed. Would have killed me yourself. Then Joab said, I cannot linger with you, okay? I cannot be with you anymore. If you won't do it, I'm going to go somewhere else. I can't deal with you. Then he took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them through Absalom's heart. Now, you'd think that would kill Absalom, wouldn't you? I think it'd kill most of us. But the scripture goes on from that. And while he was still alive in the midst of the terebinth tree, okay, he was alive when he put it in there, and 10 young men who bore Joab's armor surrounded Absalom and struck and killed him. So apparently 3 spears through your heart does not kill you. It's going to take some swords to do that with Absalom from that. And think about it. How much armor did Joab have? He has 10 men doing it. Jonathan had 1 armor bearer. Joab has 10. Now he is the commander of the army. Maybe he had different uniforms for different times, you know. Is this my Monday one? Is this the one when we're going to fight in the sun? Or is this my one when it's cold? Is it the leather-lined one or the fur-lined one for it? I don't know, but he has 10 of them. They ultimately kill Absalom. And as the man who came across Absalom hanging from the tree has warned him, this is not what David wants, is it? This is not what David said to have done. So Joab blew the trumpet. Why? Because it's over now. There's no more insurrection because there is no leader to the opposite side. There's no challenge to David anymore. Absalom is dead. And the people returned from pursuing Israel, for Joab held back the people. Let's not kill any more people. It's over. And they took Absalom and cast him into a large pit in the woods and laid a very large heap of stones over him. They didn't want to give him any honor. He wasn't going to get returned to the city of the kings and be buried with the kings or anything like that. He's just buried in a hole that they found out in the woods, and they want to make sure nobody goes and pulls him out. They put a very large heap of stones saying, yeah, go and try to get his body out and do something with it. It's not going to happen. Then all Israel fled. That's the army behind Absalom. Everyone went to his tent. Now, Absalom in his lifetime had taken and set up a pillar for himself, which is in King's Valley. He prepared for this. He was going to have it be a big thing. Why? For he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. He had no heirs. Why? Probably because he was scared to death if he'd had an heir. If I do become king and I see what I did, they'll probably do the same thing to me. I don't think I'll have any kids. Maybe he couldn't have any kids. I don't know. But I think that's probably more likely. And he called the pillar after his own name. And to this day it's called Absalom's monument. He was very much full of himself all through the process. He was above the law. He was above the king. He was above everybody. And so ultimately he didn't get a great grave, but he always had a monument that he left behind for himself. So, Semei's still out there. So he confronts David in 2 Samuel 9, verses 16 through 23. And Shimei, the son of Gera, a Benjaminite, as I said, that's kind of the connection to Saul at least, who was from Barim, remember that's where he came out from to confront David and his people. He hastened and came down with the men of Judah to meet King David. He's going to go directly. He knows he's in trouble. He picked the wrong side. You know, it's those people that went out there with a campaign. Vote for this guy, then he's not the one. You know, I had that one time I ran for office in college, and there was a kind of a tough fight between 2 of us. And at the end of that, the guy that led the way and the other guy comes, "You're not going to," because he was on my board of officers. He's going, "You know, are you going to do anything? Because I was over there, but no, I'm not going to do anything to you from that." And what's David going to do that? There were 1,000 men of Benjamin that were with Shimei. And Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, we're not going to talk about that situation. It involves other things. And his 15 sons and his 20 servants with him, and they went over Jordan before the king. Then a ferry boat went across to carry over the king's household. They've got to come across the brook Kidron and get over there, and to do what he thought good. Now Shimei, the son of Gera, fell down before the king when he had crossed the Jordan. He's throwing himself on his mercy. Please, I've got to humble myself in front of you. Then he said to the king, "Do not let my lord impute iniquity to me, or remember what wrong your servant did on the day that my lord the king left Jerusalem, that the king should take it hard." I was just being stupid. It was one of those silly times when I thought, I was with the right side, and I didn't really mean any of those things when I said, you're a bloodthirsty man, and I threw rocks at you and dust. Forget all those things, please. For I, your servant, know that I've sinned. I know that I've sinned. Therefore, you know the words, here I am. the first to come today of all the house of Joseph to go down to meet the Lord, my lord the king. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, remember him, answered and said, shall not Shimei be put to death for this, because he cursed the Lord's anointed? I'm still wanting to do it, David. You remember I wanted to do it when he was cursing this? Now he's showing up again, and we are the winners. Let me kill him from that. And on the other hand, Shimei has thrown himself at the mercy of the court, the mercy of David, saying, here I am. I'm in front of you. I didn't hide from you. I'm the first one to come today to ask for you to kind of forgive me, to overlook what I did from that. So who was it that asked the question? Well, Shimei spoke the words to David. There was no question. He did it because he wanted David to acknowledge his presence. And he wanted to plead for his life. He wanted to plead for forgiveness. And David said, what do I have to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? You should be adversaries to me today. Why is my own family going to be there? Shall any man be put to death today in Israel? For do I not know that today I'm king over Israel? This isn't the time to do it. It's a celebration. I'm back. It's not a time to take vengeance on people. Therefore the king just said to Shimei, you shall not die, and the king swore to him. That doesn't seem fair. He cursed him, threw stuff at him. He was such an advocate for the other side, but David says, nope, that's not the way I'm going to be. He talked to me about me being a bloodthirsty man. I'm not going to take his life. Doesn't mean he forgot about it. We're going to pick up as he goes into his pre-death directions in 1 Kings chapter 2, 1 through 10. I'm going to have to go quick with it. And now the days of David grew near that he should die, and he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. Be strong, therefore, and prove yourself a man. And he talks about following God's commandment. He tells him that Joab has killed a lot of people. He did things to me. He killed the two commanders of the armies of Israel. He shed the blood of war in peacetime, and he put the blood of war in his belt. So he should get doomed. Do not let his gray hair go down to the grave in peace, but show kindness to somebody that did well to me. But, starting in verse 8, and see, you have with you Shimei, the son of Gera, a Benjaminite from Bahurim, who cursed me with a malicious curse in the day when I went to Mahanaim. But he came down to me to meet me at the Jordan, and I swore to him by the Lord, saying, I will not put you to death with the sword. Now therefore do not hold him guiltless, for you are a wise man. Yeah, that's wisdom is what Solomon got. And know what you ought to do, but bring his gray hair down to the grave with blood. Don't let him live, basically. So David rested with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. Solomon, though, in his wisdom, just doesn't go out and kill him. He does with Joab. He does go and have Joab killed, because Joab, again, conspires against him with one of David's sons, and so ultimately he has him killed. But Shimei, in 1 Kings 2, starting verse 36, then the king sent and called for Shimei, that's Solomon, and said to him, build yourself a house here in Jerusalem and dwell there, and do not go out from there anywhere. For it shall be on the day you go out and cross the brook Kidron, know for certain you shall surely die. Your blood will be on your own head. And Shimei said to the king, the saying is good. This is good. I can live by this. As the Lord the king has said, so your servant will do. So Shimei went in Jerusalem, dwelt in Jerusalem many days. Now it happened at the end of 3 years, the two of the slaves of Shimei ran away to Achish, the son of Maacah, the king of Gath. And they told Shimei, saying, look, your slaves in Gath. So Shimei rose, saddled his donkey, and went to Achish at Gath to seek his slaves. And Shimei went and brought his slaves from Gath. And Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had come back. Then the king sent and called for Shimei and said to him, did I not make you swear by the Lord and warn you, saying, know for certain, on the day you go out and travel anywhere, you shall surely die? And you said to me, the word you heard is good. And why then have you not kept the oath of the Lord and the commandment that I gave you? And the king moreover said to Shimei, you know, as your heart acknowledges, all the wickednesses that you did to my father David. Therefore the Lord will return your wickedness on your own head. Not like you thought it was going to happen to David when you said it would come down on him, because he wasn't evil. But King Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever. So the king commanded Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck him down, and he died. Thus the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. Again, the here am I didn't necessarily work out completely. Took a while. Took some more stupidity from him. He had his opportunity. Solomon knew what he'd do. Solomon was wise, and Solomon didn't just go out and indiscriminately kill him after David promised it. He gave him conditions. He agreed to the conditions. But when he violated them, the result was the same. A couple of times when here I am, one worked out well because he put trust in God, and one put trust in himself. Looking ahead, next week we're going to talk a bit about Isaiah and Jeremiah and their statements of here I am. If you want some scriptures from that, there's the list you can take a look at. Again, I go right to the deal and prevent anybody feedback. Any other comments? Any other, like you had any? All right, appreciate your rapt attention. Look forward to talking to you again next week.